For most of us, Halloween is the commercial holiday celebrated every year on the 31st of October, when people carve jack-o'-lanterns from pumpkins and dress up in scary costumes to go out trick-or-treating. But what did Halloween mean to the medievals, and how did their superstitions and beliefs influence how we celebrate Halloween today? Let's travel back now to a time of witches, soul hunters, and Stingy Jack. Welcome to Medieval Madness. Do you believe in magic? It has been thought that the origins of Halloween could be linked to the Roman feast of Pomona, the goddess of fruit trees, gardens, and orchards, or Parentalia, the 9-day festival held in ancient Rome in honor of the dead. More often though, it is linked to the Celtic festival of Samhain, which translates as Summer's End. In the Gaelic saga, the Wooing of Ymir, written sometime around 800 AD, it is mentioned as the time in the medieval Irish calendar when the summer goes to rest. It was the first of the 4 quarter days and one of the 4 great festivals held during the Celtic year. A time for gathering the harvest and bringing in the animals from the higher ground to shelter for the winter months, slaughter the pigs, and salt the meat ready for the dark, cold months ahead. It was also a time when otherworldly forces were at their height, when decay and darkness walked abroad and the people of the mounds roamed the countryside. Samhain was celebrated on the 1st of November, although the festival extended over 3 nights before the big day and another 3 nights after. The exact nature of the festivities is unknown, although it's probable that the Irish people built huge bonfires as protection from the spirits, and there was a coming together of tribal groups for celebration and feasting. It's also possible that there were animal and even human sacrifices, although there are no references to this in the ancient Irish sagas. Livestock was likely being slaughtered at that time of year anyway. It's hard to trace a direct link between the Irish end of summer festival and Halloween, but they have one major thing in common: the supernatural. The otherworld is talked about a great deal in Celtic literature, and it's at Samhain that mystical events supposedly occur more than at any other time. Strange magic. According to the book Celtic Heritage, Ancient Tradition in Ireland, winter was a dark time when, quote, nature is asleep, summer was returned to the underworld, and the earth is desolate and inhospitable. November was known as the Black Month in Brittany and Cornwall. In Scotland, it was referred to as the Gloom. For the Irish, contact with the otherworld was more likely at Samhain, when the barrier between worlds was thin and the magic fog was lifted. They thought of it as a place somewhere inside our own world where time moved differently, full of gods, heroes, and ancestors. The Celts made offerings to the elves and fairies or Sids that would emerge, and the people left them gifts in the fields outside their villages. As well as the fairy folk, there were other creatures associated with sounds, such as the shape-shifting pucker or the imp-like Dullahan. The Sluagh hunters may come out of the west and steal souls, or the fairy host may haunt Samhain and kidnap people. In The Adventures of Nera, another early saga written around the year 800, Nera the hero meets a zombie-like character hanging on the gallows. He is able to slip into the otherworld on 2 occasions and discovers that its inhabitants are plotting to destroy his people in his world. But Nera finds a way to bring spring flowers and herbs back to his home as proof that he has been to another time and place beyond our physical world, and that the supernatural threat was real. Sinners, Saints, and Souls. In the 4th century, Constantine the Great was the first Roman emperor to convert to Christianity. It was a pivotal moment in the history of the Roman Empire, and one that marked the transition from classical antiquity to the Middle Ages. In the early days of Christianity, the theologian Bishop Augustine of Hippo thought it was best to, quote, not kill the heathens, just convert them. Do not cut their holy trees, consecrate them to Jesus. In other words, it was thought much easier to blend pagan customs with Christian celebrations gradually, rather than force the issue and upset the locals. Pope Gregory the Great was Bishop of Rome in the early years of the 7th century, and he expanded that idea, believing that pagan practices should be converted from, quote, worship of devils to the service of the true God. Then Pope Boniface IV consecrated the Pantheon in Rome to the Virgin Mary and all the Christian martyrs. The site was previously a pagan Roman temple. Originally, this rite, known as All Saints' Day or All Hallows' Day as it is also known, was observed on the 13th of May, the same date as the annual Roman festival of Lemuralia, a time when Romans performed rituals to banish any malevolent or fearful spirits of the restless dead from their homes. These spectres were appeased with an offering of black beans and the soothing sounds of chanting. It was in the 8th century that Pope Gregory III decided that the 1st of November should be a day to honor all of the saints and martyrs who didn't have a specific named day of their own. There were so many that there weren't enough days to honor each and every one. As Samhain was an important quarter day celebrated by many, it was hijacked by the church. In 835, in the Frankish Empire, Emperor Louis the Pious also declared that November the 1st would be a day of obligation, along with the 5 other days including Christmas Day and Ascension Day. They were marked by high masses, prayers, and other rituals, as well as celebratory feasts. Hallowmass. Saint Odilio of Cluny popularized a feast for remembering and praying for all of the souls of the dead in the 13th century. So the story goes, a pilgrim was swept up in a storm on an island. He had a vision of all the poor souls in purgatory, the space between heaven and hell, who were suffering the purification of flames as a punishment for their sins. Once home safely, the pilgrim approached Father Odilio and asked whether there was not one day in the year when special prayers could be made for the souls of those deceased. As a result, Odilio adopted an annual commemoration for all the faithful departed where alms, prayers, and sacrifices could be made for the relief of those suffering in purgatory. Odilio decreed that those requesting a mass for the dead should make an offering of money to the poor. This linked almsgiving with fasting and prayers for the dead. At first, Odilio chose a date in February for All Souls' Day in Cluny and its monasteries, but it was moved to the 2nd of November to coincide with All Saints' Day, the idea being that saints could intercede on behalf of the dead, and it was soon accepted across the whole Western Church. It became part of a Christian tradition known as All Hallowtide or Hallowmass season, and included All Saints' Eve, All Saints' Day, and All Souls' Day. As Hallowmass and Samhain were intricately intertwined, it was common to build bonfires in graveyards to ward off evil spirits. Church bells were also rung sometimes all night for the souls of the dead and to keep the demons at bay. Some people set out a lighted candle and left a meal on the table at night to appease the lost souls still wandering the earth. In the port of Bristol, the mayor entertained his city council with, quote, fires and their drinkings with spiced cake bread and sundry wines at Hallowmass. Ghosts were, quote, understood to be dead relatives who visited their kin to rectify wrongs committed against them while alive and to enforce the obligations of kinship. In Naples, Italy, on All Souls' Day, the bone houses were opened and decorated with flowers. Sometimes the corpses were dressed in robes and placed along alcoves in the walls. In Brittany, northern France, a solemn procession was taken by clergy to the graveyard where the people could consecrate their dead relatives with milk and holy water. Devil in disguise. The celebration has often raised controversy within Christianity. All Hallows' Eve became associated with witchcraft as popular activities on the day included divination and fortune-telling. These traditions were frowned upon by the church, and several biblical passages warned against the use of sorcery and foretelling the future. However, in 1552, Bishop Hugh Latimer was grieved to report that, quote, a great many of us, when we be in trouble or sickness or lose anything, we run hither and thither to witches or sorcerers whom we call wise men, seeking aid and comfort at their hands. The early church got on quite well with witches, but as the centuries passed, they became associated with the devil and were increasingly persecuted. Their gatherings on All Hallows' Eve didn't help matters, and their rituals came to be seen not just as magical, but satanic. Even their cats got typecast as demonic figures when Pope Gregory IX declared them devil's servants in 1233. The New England Puritans hated Halloween. Reverend Increase Mather, a clergyman in the Massachusetts Bay Colony and forever linked with the notorious 17th century Salem witch trials, referred to it as an abominable shame and a vile piece of heathenism rooted in Catholicism. The Puritans believed that the festival, like Christmas, was based in paganism and had close links to Satanism. Today, Christian evangelists also denounce it as a, quote, holiday that generally glorifies the dark things of this world rather than the light of Jesus Christ. Some even claim that Halloween is one of the 4 black Sabbaths when witches meet to worship the devil. However, the Catholic Church is happy to be associated with the holiday and states that the true substance of Halloween belongs to the Catholic Church, and its roots in the observance of All Saints' Day all the way back in the 8th century. The subtle shifts. In medieval Britain, the combination of a sound tradition and praying for the souls of the dead on All Souls' Day developed into the earliest form of trick-or-treating. One tradition from sound talked about the legend of Stingy Jack. He had been foolish enough to play several tricks on the devil. When Jack died, God would not allow him into heaven, and the devil annoyed at his trickery would not allow him into hell either. Jack had to roam Earth forever with just a burning coal to light his way. He placed the coal into a carved-out turnip. The Irish referred to him as Jack of the Lantern and began to carve out their own turnips, placing them in the windows of their homes to ward off the spirit of Stingy Jack. During the Middle Ages, solars travelled from home to home, often in disguise, offering their prayers in exchange for loaves of bread or a soul cake, sometimes called a Solmus cake. These cakes that were made with sweet spices and marked with a cross were really alms for the needy, as the solars were usually poor people or children. During Samhain, it was thought that the spirits dressed themselves as beggars, and refusal to help them would result in a curse. As we travel into the early modern period, these solars might sing songs and carry lanterns from hollowed-out turnips. This, along with the legend of Stingy Jack, made them the forerunner to the Jack-o'-lantern. Over the centuries, Gaelic, Roman, and Christian feasts have all blended seamlessly together. With massive Irish immigration to the US during the potato famine, Gaelic customs and folklore passed into American culture and shaped the festival of Halloween that we know and love, or hate, today. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Medieval Madness. Hope everyone has an awesome Halloween, and I'll see you next week for another video as always. Until then, have an awesome week. Cheers!